Shock! Putin won't meet with Zelensky again. The president of Ukraine is ready to fly even to Turkey, but Putin is dodging once more. Moreover, Lavrov is spouting nonsense about security guarantees. And Trump is deploying fighter jets in Romania? When and where will the meeting between the presidents of Russia and Ukraine take place? And will it happen at all? Watch all the explosive details right now.
It seems there won't be any meeting between Putin and Zelensky after all. Well, alright, more on that later. Do you remember that during his meeting with Trump, Putin agreed to security guarantees for Ukraine? Well, as always, it's not that simple.
In the West, and especially in the United States, they understand perfectly well that seriously discussing security issues without the Russian Federation is a utopia, a road to nowhere.
And if we dig deeper, Lavrov is hinting at the same negotiation format as in Istanbul in 2022.
In this context, the Ukrainian side proposed, and our delegation at the time agreed, to develop security guarantees involving all the permanent members of the UN Security Council, that is, the Russian Federation, the People's Republic of China, the USA, France, Britain, plus certain other countries. Germany and Turkey were mentioned.
Yes, exactly like that. It turns out that security guarantees for Ukraine from Russia were supposed to be provided by Russia itself, and on top of that, by China as well. But will the US and Europe see this as a diplomatic victory, or do they also understand the risks?
The Russians continue to stick to their position and keep sending out various messages, both direct and indirect, which confirm that the Kremlin in reality does not want to formalize a ceasefire, an end to the war, or a peace agreement at this point in time. Today's recent statements from Lavrov and other prominent Russian officials appear to be yet another deliberate manipulation, clearly aimed at dragging out the ongoing process and significantly delaying the imposition of crucial secondary sanctions.
The head of EU diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, already announced on August 19th that the 19th package of sanctions against Russia would be ready in September, and emphasized that Putin cannot be trusted. But of course, naturally, Lavrov responded.
She said after the Washington meeting that the European Union would not trust any agreements with the Russian Federation. That is why the European Union will continue to support the armed forces of Ukraine, and the EU will push for new sanctions. Sanctions against Russia, regardless of any agreements, which, as she said, they do not trust. But this is not diplomacy. This is already degradation.
Europe and the US are preparing a security plan for Ukraine, which is expected to be agreed upon in just 10 days. Among the options are sending instructors, air patrols, assistance with demining the Black Sea, border control using drones, and a military alliance modeled after the US treaties with Japan or South Korea.
So far, Ukraine has not received any concrete security guarantees from its allies. We have heard many different, diverse and varied hypotheses, theoretical frameworks, fundamental assumptions and conceptual models. But there are no definitive decisions that could be called truly concrete or absolutely certain, nor any that could genuinely and effectively become a truly decisive and pivotal factor in preventing potential future Russian aggression, or indeed any similar acts of hostility.
European leaders also want the US president to deploy American fighter jets in Romania as part of the security guarantees. But will Trump agree to this?
Some of Trump's allies are pushing him towards such a decision, but the American president himself is quite impressionable, and his position often changes depending on the negotiations he's conducting. The American president is in principle known for his policy of isolation and his attempts to distance himself from collective security on the continent. Therefore, the situation with American fighter jets in Romania currently looks rather unclear.
Well, as for the prospects of a meeting between Putin and Zelensky, sometimes they're ready, sometimes they're not. And now Lavrov is even talking about thorough preparations without any set dates.
As I already said, we are ready for any format. But when it comes to important meetings at the very highest level, it is absolutely necessary to meticulously prepare them as thoroughly and comprehensively as possible at all preceding and preliminary stages, so that these crucial summits do not end up worsening the overall situation, but actually put a definitive and conclusive end to the ongoing negotiations that we are indeed ready to continue.
But I hasten to remind you how quickly the meeting between Putin and Trump was arranged. As they say, where there's a will, there's a way.
The Kremlin is saying directly that Putin is not ready to go and is not prepared to make any real concessions. The nonsense that Putin fed to Trump in Alaska is a separate story that has nothing to do with the real peace process. To achieve it, two factors are important. The first is economic pressure on Russia, and the second is that Ukraine needs weapons, and a lot of them.
Nevertheless, the president of Ukraine stated that a potential meeting with Putin could take place in neutral Europe, for example, Switzerland or Austria. But Zelensky also said he wouldn't mind Turkey either.
The front is on fire. The Ukrainian Armed Forces are breaking the enemy's back along the entire line of contact. Ukrainian drones have paralyzed the occupiers' logistics. The Ukrainian Armed Forces have completely shattered the Kremlin's plans. Putin is losing control. Watch the latest updates from the front in the following report. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, Ukrainian drones delivered a powerful strike against Russian logistics. A fuel train was blown up between the occupied towns of Urozhaina and Tokmak. According to Petro Andriushchenko, advisor to the mayor of Mariupol, the train derailed, after which it was finished off with everything that could fly. Essentially, the railway connection for the Russian army through the occupied part of Zaporizhzhia region has been paralyzed. The strike was carried out by fighters from the Ronin UAV battalion of the 65th Separate Mechanized Brigade. Meanwhile, the situation at the front remains tense. According to Deep State, the enemy has advanced in the area of the Serebryanske forestry in Luhansk region and near the settlement of Olhivske in the Zaporizhzhia direction, taking advantage of weaknesses found in the defense. If previously these areas were considered relatively stable, now the enemy is trying to exert pressure. The Pokrovsk direction remains the most difficult. Over the past day, Ukrainian fighters have repelled 50 assault attacks here in the areas of Vladimirovka, Mayak, Novoekonomishne, Rodinske, Hradivka, Novoukrayinka, and other settlements.
The situation remains extremely tense. The enemy has concentrated a very large amount of the resources they have. First and foremost, the occupiers are trying to use that resource, an extremely large number of manpower, in other words, disposable orcs. These could be occupiers with completely different levels of training, or hastily assembled, excuse the expression, homeless mercenaries, criminals, convicts, or just people gathered together, untrained and unequipped. Unfortunately, there are also highly trained, exceptionally skilled special forces units among them. Moreover, there are quite professional and very capable pilots and fairly skilled and experienced artillerymen.
In addition to infantry used for attrition, the Russians are actively deploying various types of UAVs, trying to strike rear areas up to 30 kilometers deep.
In fact, the concept of a front line no longer really exists. There is an area of activity, a contact zone, and enemy UAVs of various types, including FPV drones. Strike drones can fly in as far as 5, 10, 15, 20, or even 30 kilometers. So there are different scenarios. The enemy really does use various tactics. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they don't. But in most cases, these assault attempts are unsuccessful for the enemy.
Heavy fighting continues in other directions as well. In the Novopavlivka and Lyman sectors, there were 61 clashes in the past day. The enemy attacked the areas of Hrushevka, Zeleny High, Taimirivka, Komishuvaka, Zelena Dolina, Kolodiazi, Torske, Yampol, and Hrihorivka. Activity remains high in the Toretsk, Kupiansk, Southern Slobozhansky, and Dnipro sectors. Despite the overall complexity of the situation, an interesting incident occurred in the Bilimanchina area. 2 FPV drones simultaneously hunted an enemy strike UAV. Anti-aircraft gunners from the Steel Lions Brigade and pilots from the 53rd Brigade tried to destroy the Russian Molnia. In the end, the target was hit. The past 24 hours have also been among the most intense on the front. The enemy launched missile and airstrikes, carried out artillery shelling, and used drones. In turn, the defense forces of Ukraine are steadfastly holding the line and delivering counterstrikes. Over the past day, our fighters struck 9 areas where enemy personnel, weapons and equipment were concentrated, 2 artillery systems and 1 important facility belonging to the Russian invaders. While the General Staff is not disclosing details yet, they are making it clear to the Russians that any attempt at an offensive will be destroyed. Every assault, every drone and every enemy vehicle is under fire.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Hunger for the people, billions for the chosen few. The secret deposits of the Russian elite are shocking. A city's annual budget stored in Kremlin coffers. How do Putin's associates live? Watch right now.
A recent investigation reveals the scale of the financial empire belonging to the Russian president's inner circle. The combined assets of 12 members of the top elite exceed 300 billion rubles, a sum comparable to the annual budgets of the country's largest cities, except for Moscow and St. Petersburg. Among the key figures, of course, are Putin's close relatives.
There is a private life, a truly personal and intimate space that no one is ever allowed to interfere with. I've always had a profoundly negative and deeply critical attitude toward those individuals who, with their intrusive runny noses and their often disturbing erotic fantasies, relentlessly pry into other people's private lives.
Alina Kabaeva, known as the mother of two of the Russian president's children, she has more than 1.5 billion rubles in her accounts.
In 2017, Kabaeva earned 54 million rubles at NMG, but in 2018, her income had already reached 785.5 million. In 2019, it dropped to 55 million, and in the first half of 2020, Kabaeva received 153 million rubles at NMG. That is, she was earning almost 900,000 a day. The gymnast and her relatives have all kinds of real estate. Plots in New Moscow, an apartment on Prechistenka, a cottage in Kuban, apartments on Arbat, and an estate in the Moscow region. The estimated value of the Kabaeva family's real estate exceeds 8 billion rubles. At least another 2 billion should be added to this amount. Her assets used to reach 2 and even 4 billion. According to experts, part of these funds has been invested in major construction projects, media and commercial enterprises. Control over such financial flows also provides a sphere of influence that goes beyond sports and public activities.
You know, although they say that happiness isn't about money, it's about how much you have. So you need to earn a lot of money. You still can't get it just like that.
So, is money something important to you?
Of course it's important, because without money, you're nobody.
$1.7 billion, that's exactly how much the president's younger daughter, Katerina Tikhonova, has in her accounts. This money is in Gazprom Bank, and additional funds are in the Rossiya Bank. In addition to bank deposits, Tikhonova controls several private companies and foundations, which makes her influence not only financial but also technological, especially in the field of high technology and innovation.
Like Putin's elder daughter, Maria Vorontsova, it's hard to call Katerina Tikhonova a model of morality. One moment she leaves her billionaire husband for a ballet dancer, the next she has a child out of wedlock. But family values are for everyone else, not for the elite. Look at her father. He cheated on his wife twice and has been living with a gymnast for 20 years. And nothing happens. Renat Davlet-Geldiev on the personal life of Putin's youngest daughter, which is nothing like what they tried to sell to ordinary Russians.
This is the Altamira Villa, the very mansion belonging to Putin's younger daughter, Katerina Tikhonova, and her now ex-husband, Kirill Shamalov. 300 square meters of living space, 2 large salons for entertaining guests, and a pool overlooking the beach.
The elder daughter, Maria Vorontsova, has about 330 million rubles at her disposal. These figures are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the financial influence hidden from the public eye. Experts emphasize that this method of storing assets makes them virtually inaccessible to public oversight while allowing for a high degree of financial independence.
From 2020 to 2024, Vorontsova earned 944 million rubles.
Our society, Russian society, is still not so, not such an economy-centered society. And for us, the highest and most paramount value is still the intrinsic and irreplaceable value of human life above all else.
Not only the family, but also close associates and allies possess impressive sums as well. State Duma Speaker Vyacheslav Volodin keeps more than one of his 7 billion rubles, which brings him about 166 million rubles in annual income. According to experts, the secret of these savings lies in a complex network of bank accounts, investment funds, and companies with state participation. For comparison, the average deposit of an ordinary Russian is about 500,000 rubles. The gap between the elite and ordinary citizens is rapidly widening, raising questions about the transparency of financial flows and potential risks to economic stability.
Gasoline hysteria in Russia. Ukrainian drones have paralyzed Russia's oil industry. Kilometer-long lines at gas stations. These scenes are blowing up the internet. The fuel catastrophe is gaining momentum. Gasoline is disappearing. Panic is growing. The Ukrainian Armed Forces continue their strikes.
In Primorsky Krai, there are kilometer-long lines at gas stations due to a fuel shortage.
Here's what the line looks like on Melnikhnaya.
In short, that's the situation at Alliance.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a kilometer soon. Everyone's waiting for some gas.
Right now, there are gasoline problems in many regions of Russia. Earlier, in annexed Crimea, there were gasoline shortages at gas stations due to the special military operation. And in Zabaikalsky Krai, they started selling gasoline with ration cards. The main reasons are inflation, high demand, and constant strikes on oil refineries. The last factor is becoming especially significant. Ukrainian drones attack Russian oil refineries almost every night. This is a strike on the Lukoil oil refinery in the Volgograd region, which is among the top 10 in Russia and is one of the largest producers of petroleum products in the southern federal district. Over the past week, Ukrainian UAVs have struck the refinery 3 times already. The plant has ceased operations tentatively until mid-September.
We are now seeing reports almost every day that major significant oil refineries in the European part of the country have been affected. The latest is the Lukoil plant in Volgograd, and drones are even reaching as far as the Ukhta plant in Komi, another Lukoil facility, and some plants have simply shut down.
On August 2nd, after a drone strike, the Novokuybishevsk refinery halted its operations. On August 11th, the Saratov refinery stopped receiving crude oil. On August 15th, it became known that the Volgograd refinery had stopped, and on the same day, after a drone attack, the Samara refinery also stopped accepting oil for processing.
Drone attacks on Russian oil refineries, which intensified in August and led to the shutdown of at least 4 major refineries, have deprived the economy of 1/7 of its most powerful oil processing capacity. Thus, in just under 3 weeks, oil producers lost 44.3 million tons of annual refinery capacity, minus 13.5% of the country's total, which stands at 328 million tons per year.
According to Reuters, repairs at some of the plants will last at least a month, and the Samara refinery will remain idle until the end of August. The difficulties with repairs are related to the sanctions.
Western equipment for oil refineries was included in the European restrictive measures as part of the very first package following the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, and this is causing disruptions. As a result, in 2025, Russia once again faced a gasoline shortage. Exchange prices for AI-92 and AI-95 gasoline have soared since the beginning of the year by 40% and 50% respectively, setting new historical records: 71,970 rubles per ton and 81,337 rubles per ton.
If Ukraine continues to strike Russian oil refineries, the problems with prices and the availability of gasoline in Russia will only get worse. And the current lines for fuel in some regions of Russia will seem like nothing compared to the real trouble that could arise, for example, as soon as next month.
If the Ukrainians were to ignore Biden's explicit request not to strike vital oil terminals on the Black Sea, such as in Novorossiysk, Tuapse, or on the Baltic, where Ust-Luga and Primorsk are the 2 main and significant terminals, and were to start actively attacking them, this would undoubtedly have a very serious and detrimental impact on Russia's ability to export its oil.
Strikes on Russian oil refineries and the resulting loss of capacity, as well as the potential increase in attacks, are a serious bargaining chip for Zelensky in possible negotiations with Putin.
That's all for now. For more breaking news from the front, tune in to our next episode.